I'm back. It's Ranting Ron. I'm in front of the world famous Orlando Hard Rock. Everybody, I'm back. Ranting Ron, the Ranting Ron Show here in front of the beautiful Universal Studio sign here.
Well, great to see you. I listen to you all the time, man. You're great. Best podcaster I know.
The wind is good right now. Ranting Ron, Ranting Ron.
Ranting Cast episode 7. Frank R. Curry here. Ron might be in, he might not. We'll see. He's got some stuff going on. But I'm joined with me by Andrew Berkshire. If you don't know who he is, well, you're missing out because Andrew's really, really awesome. I love your works. I love the work that you do, especially on the Steve Dangle Podcast Network. I'm a huge Steve Dangle fan, always have been. I hope people who are listening are, if you don't know who Steve Dangle is, well, he's the yelly screamy Leafs fan. That's the best way to put it. They have the podcast network over there, and Andrew works with him there. You do the Game Over series. You did Game Over Montreal. Started that this year, actually.
Yeah. We started in October to begin this year. It was my idea, and I brought it to Adam, Steve, and Jesse. Basically, looking at how poorly served a lot of Canadian markets are right now in terms of post-game content. I don't know how it is for most American viewers, but for Canadians on broadcasts on the TV, they don't have anything for post-game shows. We have one on Saturday night after the late game called After Hours on Hockey Night in Canada, but that's like, starting at midnight essentially. So I thought, why don't we give them something to watch? And it's been going really well so far. We've expanded to Toronto and Calgary and into the playoffs. Obviously, Toronto disappointed yet again. So Game Over Toronto will hit you again in maybe September for the preseason. And Calgary's still going. So it's going to be fun. Next year, we're hoping to have all Canadian markets served and maybe some American ones as well.
Yeah, that was something that I was interested in talking about too, was like the origins of the Game Over markets. You did Game Over Montreal all this season, and I mean, you got to say, like, what a first season to do it in. I mean, right after a Stanley Cup Finals run, and then they're the worst team in the league, and you have to do a post game show essentially for every single Montreal game, and I can imagine the grind it must have been, especially with each loss just piling up for the Habs this year.
Yeah, it was a long season. I'll say that. I do think that because I have to watch the games anyway, because I had a gig at the Montreal Gazette, where I have to watch the games. Doing that show made watching the games far more enjoyable to me than just watching them to write an article. Because every single show I would basically have 30 minutes to an hour where I would be chatting with people that I liked and respected about the game that we just saw, whether it was trying to find positives or just absolutely thrashing what was going on the ice. No matter what avenue we were taking, it was fun conversation. We got to bring in some brilliant people who I'd never spoken to before. You get to test out some people on air when they don't really have any experience in that. So you find some people who maybe they didn't know how good they were live, right? And you get to have some different voices as well. That was something that I was really interested in doing this year, was getting voices on a broadcast that you wouldn't regularly see on a TV broadcast. And I think that gave people who watch the Montreal Canadiens more representation. It gave people some diverse viewpoints as well. And it really worked out. As the year went on, things got tough in terms of finding content because the Canadians weren't giving us much to work with outside of Cole Caulfield. But overall, it was still a really fun season. It made it significantly more fun to do that show.
Yeah, definitely allows the season to kind of be swallowed a little better in terms of the content, not only the content to talk about, but yeah, I mean, if you're going to just go off on them, you always do that, but it gets tiring to go off on them consistently, 4 times a week doing the show or 3 times a week. So it's definitely something to understand about. Being here in Buffalo, the Sabres, we were going off on them almost every game for the past 3-4 years. So It's understandable to talk about. So you mentioned earlier with Game Over that it was an idea that you came up with. And it was just because there was no real consistent post-game shows on TV. And was that the same in the radio market too, or are you looking at it just more on the TV side?
Well, there are post-game shows on radio here, but for the most part, what you see with post-game shows is they take the people who do the least good stuff during the day, and they're the ones who get stuck with the post-game show.
Oh yeah.
And it's often just like a call-in show. And just for me personally, I don't really want to end like watching a game, especially a frustrating game, by hearing about like Joe Schmo from the suburbs who is angry and like storming around his house and waking up his kids because the goalie didn't make the right save. That's just not interesting to me. I want to hear actual analysis about the game, about the season, about who stood out, who didn't, what they need to work on, things like that, or like something with real insight. And I thought it doesn't really exist. Like, I don't want to trash radio up here, but for the most part, post-game shows are really terrible.
I definitely feel you in that. As somebody who works in radio, I don't work in sports radio. I work in news radio, but I work next to a sports radio station, so I completely understand. I really understand that. I was actually quite curious to like how if there's any differences between not only radio but TV between Canada and the U.S. But for radio, it's essentially the same thing. At least in the Buffalo market, I know, and nothing really much you can do here. In Buffalo, there's one sports station, so they can control pretty much how sports talk is done in this market, at least. At least in Toronto and Montreal, you got multiple stations to go off of.
Not in English,
especially in the Toronto market. I'm talking about
in Toronto market. There's more, but in Montreal, it's only one English radio station, right?
Right.
And most radio stations are owned by like one or two companies in Canada. Yeah. So you have directives, and also those radio stations, like, part of the reason the quality is poor is because they're staffed so thinly, right? You have people doing 4 people's jobs from 10 years ago. And it's just, you can't do that and make a quality product. So it's a difficult situation for them. So we're going to come in, and we're hoping to bring in basically a generation of talent that wouldn't have got a chance elsewhere, and bring them to a growing community in SDPN, which we believe will be a big player in sports media over the next 10 years and longer. And this is just like the start of it.
Yeah, and somebody like myself who's been a follower of Steve, of Adam and Jesse for so long as well. God, I started listening to their podcast. I want to say, man, it definitely was before the McEichel draft year. So you're talking pre-Matthews as well. Right around then, I think, was when I started, and just seeing how they're growing their brand, and now including you into that. It's great to see, and it's, I'm very interested to see how the expansion continues. So now it's like Game Over Montreal, Game Over Toronto. Now you got Game Over Calgary, which is still going on. Game Over, and then we're assuming that the other Canadian markets are going to be in full swing by next season.
That's the hope. I can't guarantee that, but based on the advertising revenue that we're bringing in right now, I would assume that would be something that we'd be shooting for. Everything depends on finding the right people, right? Like, we wanted to launch Edmonton this year, and we just didn't find anyone with the experience necessary that we could trust to run the streams. Because, if you're listening to this and you're thinking of applying for a city next year, be prepared that you need a computer with at least 16 gigabytes of RAM. You need to be able to stream in like 720p at the least. We can supply camera, mic, lighting, all that sort of jazz. but I don't think we're going to be buying people laptops, you know?
No,
that's a little bit
no.
rich.
No, I mean, it's a good thing I bought this computer last year, and my retail job at least gives me a discount on them. I work, in a tech store, so it helps with that, But yeah, I mean, not everybody has that kind of access, so I could see why it would be a little bit difficult to find people, especially so soon. I mean, next season is going to come by really quickly. So if the hope is to start expanding, not only to the Canadian markets, but you had mentioned potentially American markets too. I mean, I can understand why it might not be a right away thing. It's always a tricky process. And then to finding the right people. I mean, you gotta be able to find people who you like and who you can connect with as well. And you just said who you can trust. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big thing, and we want to give diverse voices a chance. It's like really important to us, and we also want to have those people supported to the point where we're not throwing them on an island, right?
Oh,
you want
yeah.
everyone to have the best possible chance of success.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I'm excited for you guys personally as a listener, and even with the other shows going on too. With now that Jesse has his own podcast, CJ show. I was actually just before we were coming on listening to the latest Steve Dangle podcast with Chris Johnson on. Just hearing the thoughts on the Leafs and everything, and Game 7 as well. And then Agent Provocateur with Alan Walsh too. That's always a fun listen to as well. So really interested to see maybe what other shows are on the horizon. And on Noxie and Cats as well is the other one. But really interested to see like what other shows are on the horizon for you guys. So round 2 started. We're second day of it. We saw Colorado beat St. Louis in overtime last night. Really good game. That game really showed me that I think St. Louis can push this series to 7. I picked Colorado in 7 personally. Tampa and Florida. I mean, Florida did what they could to really try to keep it close, but Tampa just flexes their muscles, and they just continue to show that you've got to play a perfect game to beat them every single night. What did you take out of the game 1s from last night? And then we can also talk a little bit about the round 1 series as well.
I mean, I actually felt differently about the St. Louis Colorado game. Honestly, I think that you're not going to get that kind of performance from Jordan Binnington every night. I think that series is going to be over relatively quickly. The fact that the St. Louis Blues lost that game, that says a lot to me, because they had everything possible go right for them in that game, and Colorado is they're just too fast. They're way too fast for St. Louis. I think that's the biggest thing there, and the talent level is just incredible. Hot takes from the first round. I think Toronto. I think the fans are going too soft on the team. I think that Tampa Bay was not good in that first round series. They were good in that first game against Florida, but again, I don't think Florida's playing very good hockey. I don't think they played very well against Washington.
Yep.
I think that that series should have been over in 4 or 5 based on the disparity between the two teams. I think Tampa Bay continues to look very tired. I don't like what I'm seeing from Andrei Vasilevsky. He looks really jittery. He looks like he's giving up way more rebounds than he has been in the last 2 years. How can that team possibly not be tired? Every other team that made the conference finals last year missed the playoffs for a reason. It was a short summer. Players didn't get a chance to recover. Now, Tampa Bay changed over a lot of their team very successfully, and that's going to help. But guys like Corey Perry, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, who's now injured, they're going to break down in these playoffs. And the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs, with Braden Point out and Nikita Kucherov only able to take 20-second shifts, were not able to tie a 1-goal game. I know Leafs fans think, oh yeah, they played well and the stars showed up and everything. That's honestly kind of embarrassing. I think this one is as bad as some of their recent other embarrassing first-round performances. If the Tampa Bay Lightning played the Stanley Cup final last year like they played the first round this year, the Montreal Canadiens would have beat them. That's how stark the difference is, in my opinion. Yeah. I didn't see any of the offensive dynamism that they had last year. The magic just was not there. They were on again, off again during that series. And yes, the Leafs are a good team, but the Tampa Bay Lightning just were not very good.
This definitely felt like the most gettable to beat them. Was the Leafs series.
Yep.
That's kind of how I felt too. I also feel like Tampa's a team that they could just beat you in different ways. You know, we always know they're a high octane team. They push the pace. Kucherov, you know, high scoring with Kucherov, with Stamkos, with points. Even Palat too, and then from the defense as well. I mean, you got your big three on lefties and Hedman, Sergachev, McDonough. And then, but then if you even get by them, you got to get by Vasilevsky, who's still, I mean, even despite how the first round went, even if he didn't have the best season from his standards, still one of the best goalies in the world. I still think he's number one in my opinion, even with the seasons Shashir can have, just because of Vasilevsky's been doing it consistently.
Yep.
I think fatigue will definitely catch up with Tampa if it hasn't already. I do think it has. Maybe some people don't think so, but that's their opinion. That's fine. I definitely did feel though that with Toronto specifically, that if they wanted to make major changes to their core, to their franchise, I think last year would have been the time to do it. I'm not giving them a pass this year, but we also have to remember last year they choked to Montreal. That was a choke. Even though they had chances to win, they couldn't get it done. They were up 3-1 in the series. Yes, they lost Tavares. They were up 3-1 in the series still. How can you use not having Tavares as one of the reasons why you lost? You were up 3-1. Just win one more game. And Montreal wasn't the best team last season. I mean, they were, I think, 18th in the league. I mean, yeah, 4th in the North Division, which got them in, but 18th overall. They had to win last year and they couldn't do it. I think they didn't have to win this year, but if you were the team that took out Tampa, you're the next team. You're the next hunter. You're the next hunted. Everyone's coming for you now because you took out the champs. You're the team that ended the two-time champs run. It's like Washington back in 2018. They took out the two-time champs in Pittsburgh in the second round. Finally got over the hump themselves.
There's an emotional quality to it, right? Like a mental side to it. That
there is.
You just know that, like, watching the Leafs this year, if they were able to beat Tampa, they probably go on a run, especially with how Florida's playing right now.
Yep.
But yeah, last year was their opportunity. They should have beaten the Montreal Canadiens. It's kind of funny that series that the Canadiens played against the Leafs was probably the worst they played until they got to the final against Tampa, and they were just out of gas against a way better team. Mm-hmm. Like, they absolutely destroyed the Winnipeg Jets. Like, it was ridiculous how bad they destroyed the Winnipeg Jets. And then against the Vegas Golden Knights, who were also heavily favored, the Canadiens were just as good as they were in that series and honestly controlled the inner slot way better than the Golden Knights did. The Golden Knights were way too complacent taking shots from the perimeter, and they couldn't get control of that series. So it's weird that the Canadiens were, on the one hand, definitely a Cinderella team, but in two of the three series that they won, they were very clearly deserving of winning. You know, they only really got lucky one time, and then that luck run out in the final, as it always does with Cinderella teams.
Oh, always does. I guess going back to Toronto, it's like you lost to the two-time champs, so I can understand maybe not wanting to make major changes, but I don't think they will, but I think they will in a way where I don't think they're going to trade any of their core four players in Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander. No. But, and you know, I'll put Morgan Riley in that as well because he's got that new contract kicking in next season too. I think anybody else is completely up for grabs. I think Jake Muzzin is a cap casualty for them if they need to. They only have like, I think $7.5 million in cap space this summer, and they should be looking to re-sign Jack Campbell. he didn't. I thought he had a good year. Obviously, his month of November was unbelievable. One of the best months I've ever seen out of a goalie. And the rest of the months, I would say average, I guess, maybe below average. But he was also hurt. But then he played really well down the stretch, and I thought he was fantastic in the Lightning series too. They really should look to re-sign him and get a capable, maybe even just a capable 1B next to him. They don't have to go out big spending, but they got to get rid of that Mrazek contract and then just find a guy who you can trust to be a good starter for them if Campbell gets hurt. It's similar.
That's the thing with Campbell, right? It's less if than when.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's why I say like the 1B, because then you don't have to rely on Campbell to play 60 games. You can at the very least assure that he plays half the year and find a guy who you can trust to play the other half of the year. Not a guy that's going to be on Campbell's level, because you're not going to find a guy like that. But look at how the Rangers have had with, they go from Lundqvist to Shesterkin and they still have Georgiev. Even Boston, like they have Jeremy Swayman, but they still sign Linus Ullmark. If you can find a duo similar, I mean, even like the Hurricanes, they went out and got Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta. So it's like, even though both of those guys are kind of injury prone, what are the, and it was a low chance that both would be injured at the same time. Now it did happen, but you're not guaranteeing that with every team and every time that happens. So go out and get a guy who you can find at a good number and who you can trust. Who that is, I have no idea, but I know the Sabres need a goalie too. So if the Leafs are looking for a goalie, the Sabres are probably looking in the exact same space the Leafs are.
Yeah, it's tough. Goalies, they're both undervalued and overvalued, right?
Yeah.
I think every team thinks that goalies are an area where they can not spend nowadays, because they're like the number one goaltender is kind of a thing of the past. Even guys like Vasilevsky and Hellebuck, you don't really want them playing 65 games a year. There's too much risk to their health. But yeah, I mean, Darcy Kemper is a UFA at the end of this year, apparently. So there's somebody that you could look at. I feel like Colorado's probably going to re-sign him, though.
I think so, too.
And he will likely want to stay there, because why would you want to leave the Colorado Avalanche at this point in time? But there's always somebody out there, and young goaltenders who can surprise. There's guys worth taking a risk on. But Jack Campbell, I know, is asking for a huge raise. And, you've already got Morgan Rielly, who isn't going to get any better at age 29 next year, who's getting a 50% raise going into it. And like $7.5 million is not a lot for Morgan Rielly, but it's a lot when you're already paying Matthews $11.64 million a year, Tavares $11 million, Mitch Marner almost $11 million. It adds up relatively quickly. I will say, I don't think that Tavares is a guy who's for sure going to be there for the remainder of his contract. And
interesting,
because he has a lot of value around the league. A lot of people really love him, but he's clearly fallen off over the last couple of years. Like, he is easily the least good player of their big four, but making the second most amount of money because he was a UFA. We can argue whether or not it was a good contract or not, but the fact is most of that money in his contract has already been paid out. Starting next year, his actual salary take home is only $7.95 million. So for most teams acquiring him, if you're looking at a team like a Phoenix that's trying to get to the cap floor, but you want to still be a little bit competitive, hey, John Tavares, you can save $3 million a year in actual cash while still hitting the cap floor. The tricky thing is he has no movement clause, so that becomes an issue. But Tavares seems like that type of guy who will take one for the team. I doubt he'd go to Arizona, but if they can find a place for him where they get salary back, I feel like he's more movable than people believe.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I guess it's just a matter of maybe that sounds a lot like a next year kind of thing, especially if you have another first round exits. Because I think we also have to remember too, next year, July 1st in 2023 is when Matthews and Nylander are eligible for an extension.
Yep.
So that's going to be the biggest thing, is now if you try to trade Tavares, how much does that impact, one, Matthews' next contract, two, his interest in signing his next contract with Toronto? It's why I can definitely see why maybe you have to make major changes after this year, but I think you're definitely making major changes if you still have another first round exit next year too.
Yeah, the Maple Leafs desperately need the cap to go up. They made big bets that the cap was going to continue rising, and then the pandemic hit, and the NHL didn't make any money, and they're stuck, right? So they're one of the teams that bet big and lost. It happens. It happens to lots of teams.
Yep.
So they need
Vegas is another team.
Yep, they need those big American TV deals to kick in the next couple of years after the players pay their fair share back to the league after the league took such a huge hit the last couple of years. It's going to take a while, but maybe by the time Matthews' contract is up, things get back to a $95-100 million cap. It'd be a lot to ask for the next 3 years or so, but it could happen. You never know, but they desperately need it to happen because this competitive window, there's situations where like Alex Ovechkin, for example, won the cup. I think he was like 32 or maybe even 34 years old. And, I see a lot of Maple Leafs fans point to that as like, hey, this could be us. But Alex Ovechkin signed like a gigantic long-term deal back when those were allowed. Right. And so at the time when he first signed it, he was a hugely highly paid player. But by the time they actually won, he was not even close to the highest paid player in the league, I don't believe. So they aren't able to do that with Matthews. In a couple of years, Matthews is not going to be making 11 million. He's going to be making 14, 15 million. Oh, yeah. And then, things get complicated again. Oh, yeah. There's just no way to do this with this many big contracts and still maintain flexibility.
I think there is one way you can do it, but the Leafs haven't done it, and that's hitting on more draft picks, especially early on, when you're looking at the 2014 till at least now 2018 range, and they haven't had first round picks, last few years, but where are the second and third round picks coming in? Recently I think they've done kind of well with them. Nick Robertson is a guy I think they need on the team next season to provide some depth scoring. Matthew Nyes is a guy he's going to be back in college next season, but then after his college season next year, he's a guy who I think they should be looking at giving an entry level contract to. They just signed Nick Abruzzese as well. Those are more draft. If they have more of those draft picks coming in between 2017, even 2017, 2018, 2016, going back that far too. I do think you're looking at a better situation for the Leafs. Just shows how important drafting is. And even though it is a crapshoot, if you find a way to hit on those picks, you're going to get good a lot quicker than more people would like to admit. Case in point, Tampa Bay. Kucherov, second round pick. Braden Point, third round pick. Andre Palat, seventh round pick. God, who else can I think? Eric Cernak was like a mid-round pick.
Ross Colton,
I think was like a fourth or a fifth round pick. Cirelli, Killorn, like these are all mid-round picks that they just hit on, and they just were able to find these guys. And you also got to credit player development too. That takes a big reason why these guys hit.
It's more than half, honestly.
Yeah, really. Do you have any other takes from round one?
From round one, I was a bit surprised at how much the Flames struggled with the Dallas Stars, honestly. But I think that just comes down to Jake Ottinger putting on arguably the greatest goaltending performance in a single round of all time. Like, that's how good he was in that series.
I haven't seen a goaltending performance like that since Demko in the bubble.
Yeah, I mean, Demko's comparable for sure.
He almost single-handedly won that series against Vegas.
Yep. But again, that's the whole thing with Vegas is their team that is far too complacent with shooting from the perimeter, and that boosts up those goaltender save percentages. And it's one thing to have, like, you talk about like expected goals and all that stuff, but if you're facing 20 shots and the average shot is like a 10% XG shot versus 50 shots and the average shot is a 5% XG shot, like it may end up being around the same goals saved above expected or whatever, but the guy who faced 20 shots has a way harder night.
Yeah, that's why I try to always look at like, okay, which ones are the high danger, which ones are medium danger and low danger. And then I try to see, okay, the higher danger shots that they're saving more often. Okay, now you're stealing it there. I don't remember what Demko's numbers were in the bubble. It's something I have to look up. But Ottinger, I mean, you're seeing plenty of high danger opportunities for Calgary, and he was just stopping them. If not, they were at least like they weren't missing by that much. I remember Matthew Tkachuk in Game 7 had a couple opportunities that he didn't miss by much as well, and it just took that slight puck to be on edge for Gaudreau to be able to just sneak it under the bar and just over the shoulder of Ottinger. I mean, the puck wasn't even perfectly placed. It was almost right on edge when Gaudreau shot in. It just found its way, and sometimes it's just all it takes to beat a goalie who's just on a heater.
Yep, 100%.
You know,
I mean, sometimes you just got to shoot from everywhere, and a guy like Gaudreau can wire it, right? So it's funny. You know, they needed in that game 7, they needed Matthew Tkachuk to bring it, they needed Tyler Toffoli to bring it, and they needed Johnny Gaudreau to be the guy, and all three of them got there, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, it really makes this Battle of Alberta series really fun to watch. I mean, we were robbed of it because of the pandemic in 2020, and I'm just so glad to be able to have it again. I'm worried about one of my friends. So one of my buddies here in the Buffalo area, he's a writer for the Oilers and SB Nation. And he's, you know, I'm worried about how he's feeling. Obviously, like we have our ways to kind of cope and everything, but I'm really wondering how he's feeling about all of this too. Just it's going to be so much fun, and that game's going to be later tonight after the Rangers Carolina game, which is still 1-0. Like I have like 9:30 left in the third period, and this game's just been kind of boring and everything.
Yeah, it's been a grindy game.
Very grindy game. You know, one other thing that I definitely took from round one was I think the Kings are a lot closer to being a real not juggernaut, but real contending team, like a true contender who could potentially contend with the likes of a Calgary a lot sooner than what it seems like. I think they're really just a couple pieces away from doing that, and a 7-game series with the Oilers right away should tell you that. And I mean, they play mostly defensive style, and that's more based on the talent that they have. But the talent that they have and some of it that's coming up should tell you that they're a team that's very much on the rise. And if they can get another scoring forward, especially another sniper in that lineup, I think they're a team that can really contend a lot sooner. I mean, Kaliev had a great year. You've got Byfield coming up. Byfield, Deneau, and Kopitar should be your top 3 centers going forward. That right there, that's what you build around when you have a forward core is 3 really good centers. And Arvidsson didn't play most of the Edmonton series, not all of it. I don't remember how much of it he played, but you still have him. They still got Alex Turcotte in the minors. You hope that he comes up soon. And even on defense, they didn't have Drew Doughty the whole series. So you hope that you have him back next year, but obviously he's getting up there in age. You still got Brandt Clark, who they drafted last year. I really like him a lot. I think he's going to be really good for the Kings. What did you think about that Kings series? If anything, maybe do you think the Kings are a team that's on the rise?
Yeah, I mean, I predicted that series would go 7 before it started, even without Drew Doughty. And I think that's, if you look at that series, if Drew Doughty is healthy and ready to go, what happens? Does Edmonton make it out of it? That dynamic duo of Kopitar and Deneau to match up against is just a nightmare for any team, even McDavid and Draisaitl. So the Kings have something special going on there. I think my only question is whether or not things fall into place for them quickly enough to take advantage of the last prime years, or not even prime years, but the last good years for Doughty and Kopitar, because those are fleeting. Both those guys are mid 30s now. So it's getting to be tough. And, Doughty has already looked like he's fallen off pretty significantly. He gets really upset when people don't put him on Team Canada and stuff. But overall, they have a lot of work to do on the defensive end. They've got some good players there, Sean Dursey, for example, but really bad defensively in that series.
Oh yeah.
And I know they went with the young kid in goal for parts of this season, but I don't think Jonathan Quick is going to be the guy for them either.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so you're gonna have to wrap up really soon, but really quick before you head out for the night, what are your predictions for round 2?
I think Calgary's going to take it in the Battle of Alberta. I still think Florida beats Tampa Bay because just exhaustion eventually has to be a factor there, and Florida can't go with a 0% power play forever. Like eventually they're gonna find a way to start ripping them like they did in the regular season. Carolina will beat New York. I'm not impressed with New York. I think that if they didn't manage to injure Sidney Crosby in that first round series against the Penguins, they go out in like 5 games, and that's against their third string goaltender, which says a lot.
Say maybe even if DeSmith plays the whole series, I think Pittsburgh wins.
Exactly. Right. So, and then there's the last series out west, which Colorado's going to win. I mean, everybody knows Colorado's going to win that series. Good luck to St. Louis.
All right. Well, Andrew, thank you for coming on tonight. This was really fun. I was super excited for this. I really like what you do. Good luck with everything going forward at the SDPN with the Game Over series. Hopefully we see some expansion with you guys.
My pleasure, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, we're going to take a real quick break, and then I'm going to give you my own predictions for round 2. Well, Andrew Berkshire is awesome. I absolutely loved talking to him tonight. I hope you did too. So I'm just going to give you right before we end the show, I'm just going to give you my predictions for round 2. Andrew, he took Calgary, he took Colorado, he took Florida, and he took Carolina. I agree with him on 3 of them. I think Calgary wins the series over Edmonton in 6. I'm taking Colorado to win the series in 7 over St. Louis. I think especially even though Colorado massively outplayed St. Louis last night, St. Louis has the capabilities to match Colorado offensively. Maybe not as much offensively, but they can definitely match them, especially if they're getting goaltending. And Jordan Binnington's going to be the big key in this series, even just goaltending as a whole. Because one thing that St. Louis has over Colorado is they can roll two decent goalies. Colorado, I don't think Francois is going to be able to keep Colorado in a series as much as Kemper would. But if Binnington starts to fall off, St. Louis can always just run with Ville Husso, and he had a great season. He just had a couple bad games against Minnesota, and then Binnington just took the crease and hasn't given it up just yet. So I think the series is going to be a lot closer. In 7 games, Colorado will ultimately win that one. Out here east, I should say, Rangers Hurricanes, they're up 1-0 right now. I'm taking Carolina in 5. Even if the Rangers win tonight, I still think Carolina wins this series. Might not be 5 then, might be 6, but I'm going to say Carolina in 5. And then I'm taking the Tampa Bay Lightning to beat the Florida Panthers. I'm taking that series in 6. One thing that really gets me is, Tampa has shown signs of fatigue, but yet they still keep winning. Sergei Bobrovsky is going to be huge in this series. Obviously, Ron and I had gone back and forth on Bobrovsky. But most of that for me was they can still get out of the first round. I never said that they would get out of the second rounds. So they have to play. They're playing Tampa. They're down 1-0 in the series. I'm not liking Florida's chances. I'm going to take Tampa in 6. So thank you for listening tonight. This was a lot of fun. I had a great time chatting with Andrew. Hopefully we can get him back on in the near future, and I wish him a lot of luck with everything that he's got going on for him. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.